So let's talk about day 2 for this puppy. And I'm going to make it easy on myself and stand here in the shade. So day 2 consisted of having these sheep right next to his fence line and the adult dog. And there's a lamb that we're likely to hear more from here shortly. That is about a half-grown bottle baby. Very vocal, very much a pet. And because this pup is going to be partly a companion dog, and because, so let's back up. The first 48 hours of transition for any LGD onto a new property are kind of golden hours. There's a sweet spot of time where the dog is trying to figure out what's normal for the property, and everything that they encounter within that window of time becomes part of what is normal. And then after that time, they start to question new things because they weren't there to start with. So it isn't a black and white situation, but it's a really cool time to take advantage of. So I introduce as many novel things as I can think of that I think the puppy can handle, and then I watch the puppy, make sure I didn't do too much. So the next morning that I came out after I fed him, I opened this gate and we went out into the interior of the barn, and I had the 2 little border collies with me, and I took this horrible little lamb out with us. And this puppy has not lived with sheep. He's lived with goats and a pony and a horse and chickens and cats and creatures everywhere, but the screaming half-grown sheep was new. And because that baby is a bottle baby, all she wants to do is circle my legs and trip me up and keep me from walking. So no matter what this puppy did with that lamb, the lamb is going to be Velcro to me. So I can afford to ask this puppy what his behavior is going to be like at liberty with a small creature. So we walked around out in the barnyard, and the lamb followed, and the pup went back and forth between following Casey and then checking in with me and then checking in with this little lamb, Snowflake, I think my husband named her. And when he would check in with her, he was pretty bouncy. He'd go spring, 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 put his nose right on her. He took a hold of her ears a couple of times or brushed his mouth. I don't know if he actually took a hold of her, but he bumped her ears and she moved her head away. But she was never afraid of him, and he never did any damage. And when he moved quickly with her, I would just speak to him, put a hand down. He'd glance at my hand. I'd say, wow, this is really cool. And I'd take a step, and he'd look at where I was going to walk, and then he'd go off with Casey, and then he'd check in again. And we went back and forth like that for about 15 minutes, and by the end of that time, he was walking companionably next to that little lamb and interacting with her very appropriately and relaxed about it, and that's great. And that does not mean that I'm going to put him out in a pasture with this sheep by itself, but that was a really good first sheep introduction. That evening when we did, so he spent his day out on the creek and up and down. That evening when we did chores, I brought him out with me and let him follow me for about half of the chores. So I didn't have him have to go super far. I didn't want him to have to go very far from his home base here. I left his gate open so that he could retreat back to his home base if he wanted to. He ended up at one point out enough that either he got tired or insecure, or I don't know, but I was sitting in my little vehicle, my little Kawasaki Mule, and he tried to climb in with me, and I thought, that's a really good idea, let's do that. So I put him up on the seat with me, and he sat next to me, and we drove around the ranch. And that's pretty cool because he gets car sick in a car. He just got here. Being in an open air kind of vehicle like that, that's a new experience for him. We went really slowly. I had sat and snuggled with him, and we went to somewhere he'd never been before. The border collie's out in front of us. He's watching these 2 border collies mirror for him that what we're doing is safe and it's fine. And then after I got through with where I had driven to with him, was time to drive back here to the barn. I let him follow the vehicle. It was dark by then. I let him follow the vehicle, and I called him. And I haven't called him yet. We haven't done recall yet, but he had a likelihood of coming with me because we were traveling somewhere and the dogs were there too. So I started recall with him, and as he turned around and came quickly with me, I told him how wonderful he was as we drove along, and I reinforced the recall, and we drove all the way back to the barn, and he's wagging his tail and he's having a great time. Brought him in this gate, gave him his dinner, put him to bed. And that is 48 hours into it. That is a really, 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 really beautiful way to start. And part of what worked for that is the fact that I've done this a lot and there's experience, but part of it is that this puppy was ready for that much that quickly, and that is not typical. And for a more typical pup, even this age or not, I mean, what we did, that whole thing over 2 weeks would be much more in keeping with what's normal for most dogs of this age. So he's a rock star. This guy is really cool and I'm enjoying him. Today, I won't get this on video probably, or maybe we'll do it tomorrow, but the next step is going to be to take him in this pen that goes into this field that he's been living next to, with the 3 adult sheep and the little lamb. And I'm just going to do some chores out there and walk around with him and step in and redirect as necessary or not. But he's been living next to these sheep. He knows what they look like and how they behave, and they come over to the fence and touch noses with him. So I have created a likelihood of success, and I'm going to do that in a small enough area that I can step in front of him if I need to. And these are my puppy trainer sheep. They're worth their weight in gold. Those 3 adults were raised, they were bottle lambs raised in litters of puppies, so they think puppies underfoot is normal, which is pretty cool. So they don't run either. So if the puppy charges around a little bit, they'll keep eating, and he will learn that he can just move around. So that'll be hopefully what we do tomorrow. So that's where we're at with, hey you.